tarde a todos. O Piano e Suas Perspectivas é um programa da Escola de Música e Artes Cênicas, Reitoria Digital da Universidade Federal de Goiás e a Mississippi State University, com apoio da Fundação para a Ciência e Tecnologia de Portugal, Centro de Estudos de Sociologia e Estética Musical da Universidade Nova de Lisboa, Centro de Estudos Brasileiros, Rádio Universitária e Rádio Brasil Central FM. Fazem parte dessa equipe do programa, além de mim, Maria Carolina Porto, Pablo Lisboa, Rosângela Yasbeck Seba, Sérgio de Paiva e Wesley de Menezes. Nossa proposta é levar a todos os interessados assuntos relacionados à importância da arte e seu papel na sociedade. Muito obrigada a todos vocês pela audiência. A entrevistadora de hoje será a doutora Rosângela Seba, chefe do Departamento de Piano da Escola de Música da Mississippi State University. The Piano and Its Perspectives is a program of the School of Music and Performing Arts, Digital Department of the Federal University of Goiás and the Mississippi State University, with support from the Foundation for Science and Technology of Portugal, Center for Studies in Sociology and Musical Aesthetics of the New University of Lisbon, Center for Brazilian Studies, Radio Universitária and Radio Brasil Central FM. Besides me, Maria Carolina Porto, Pablo Lisboa, Rosângela Yasbeck Seba, Sérgio de Paiva e Wesley de Menezes are part of the program's team. Our proposal is to bring to all those interested issues related to the importance of music and its role in society. Thanks so much to all of you for the audience. The interviewer today will be Dr. Rosângela Seba, head of the piano department, Mississippi State University. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good evening to Portugal. It is my pleasure now to invite a friend of mine. In fact, I was always interested in inviting him for this interview. Professor Michael Gurt is the Louisiana State University Paula Garvey Manship Distinguished Professor. Welcome, Michael.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
We have Professor Gurt. He won the first prize at the Gina Bachauer International Piano Competition in 1982, and many other prize winner in international competitions in Pretoria, South Africa, and Sydney, Australia. He has also have performed in Alice Tully Hall, and Weill Recital Hall and Carnegie Hall in New York, Los Angeles, Detroit, Hong Kong, Melbourne, Capetown, and Istanbul, Turkey. And he has also performed in Brazil many times in many different places, as well as given master classes and classes in Brazil and festivals. So I would like to welcome Michael Gurt. And we're going to just talk about music, talk about you and your experience as a musician and what, as a pianist, has brought you to different jobs as a musician. So, Michael, can you just give us an idea of how you started learning music?
Well, I've been very lucky. My father was a piano professor. He retired 20 years ago. He's still around. He's still playing. But I got my interest in music from my father. He taught me piano until I went to college.
What was he also teaching your sisters? I know you have two sisters, right?
I have three younger sisters. He wasn't teaching. They weren't really that interested. I'm the oldest. All three of my sisters are younger, two of them much younger. And they weren't really all that interested in music.
Were you interested as a young age?
Well, it's funny because I started on the violin. Now, I was not really very good at the violin, but I did learn how to read music.
And how old were you?
I probably was about 8 when I started, or 7 when I started on the violin.
And when did you start the piano?
And then after a while, I decided, well, why don't I try the piano? The violin wasn't really going too well. It was not really the right instrument for me. I decided to try the piano and very quickly became very interested in it. And that was at about the age of 10. Now, on the piano, when you, at the early stages of playing the piano, if you can read music, you can move very quickly.
Yeah.
And I was already able to read music pretty well, so I was able to advance quickly. By the time I was 11 or 12, I had caught up.
And how long did you study the violin? Like 2-3 years?
A couple of years, probably, maybe 2 years. But I really wasn't very good at it. I was fascinated with it at the beginning, but I just couldn't play it in tune. I couldn't get my fingers into the right places somehow. It just wasn't right.
I understand. I totally understand. So did you study with your father the whole time? And what was that relationship? Because I studied with my sisters at the beginning, right at the beginning. I studied with my second sister and my twin sister. Studied with our oldest sister. It kind of became informal in a way because it was at home with the relatives. So how was that dynamic with you and your dad?
Well, my dad is truly an exceptional person. It really worked out very, very well. My dad had his studio at the university where he taught, and on Friday afternoons after school, I would walk over there and take my lesson with him.
And where was that?
And this was in Ypsilanti, Michigan. You know, it's very close to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. I would go there and take a lesson with him. But of course, when I was practicing at home, whenever he'd hear me reading a wrong note or playing a wrong note, he would call out the correct note. G sharp. And so, there was that also. But there really was not any friction between me and my father. And it really worked out beautifully.
Is your mother a musician as well?
My mom plays the piano. She didn't do it professionally, but she did it really at quite a high level for a non-professional.
Wonderful. Did she study, did she get a degree in piano or?
I think she might have done some of that at the undergraduate level, but she didn't get a degree in it. I think it might have been music history or something like that she took at the undergraduate level at Brooklyn College in New York. But I'm not quite clear on that. I'll have to ask her a little later today.
And so how did you become, how did you came to an age where you thought, that's what I want to do as a profession?
Well, I was really, I became so interested in it that my parents, a lot of parents, when their kid is playing an instrument, they have to tell them, go practice. But for me, my parents had to beg me to stop because it really took over my life. And, I was either listening to music or practicing almost all my waking hours, except when I was playing a little bit of chess at high school. And so I was pretty certain by the time I got into high school that this is what I want to do. I simply have to do this. And actually, now that I teach at the university, often parents will bring their child in, to play for me and ask whether the child should study music. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't even have to hear the student play to give them the answer to this question. But of course, I'm always interested in hearing the student, and I do, but I don't really have to. All I have to do is ask a question to the student. Is there anything in the world that will make you happy besides studying music? If the student answers yes, then I say you should do that instead. If the student answers no, music is the only thing for me, then I say, well, then you need to study music.
Yeah. And then how did you decide to go to Ann Arbor and study? In fact, you study with also a dear friend of mine, Louis Nagel. So how did that happen?
Okay. Well, now Ann Arbor was about 8 miles away from where I grew up. And, it was a much more cultured town than Ypsilanti where I lived, just a few miles away. And so our family spent most of its time in Ann Arbor. And when Louis Nagel got the job at Michigan, this was probably the late 60s, my parents struck up a friendship with the Nagels, which continues to this day. We're still really good friends. And so when it was time to go to university, the obvious thing was to hand me off to Louis Nagel to study.
And did you, during that time prior to your audition, had you had any lessons or masterclass with him, or was only the time that you went to the university?
Only the time I went to the university, actually.
Is that right?
You know, I had gone to his recitals, you know, even as a kid. And, you know, I knew him on a personal level. Even then, I knew it was going to work out. It, in fact, worked out just great.
He has, it is funny. One time we were talking, Louis and I, we were talking, and I said something about you. I said, yeah, Michael, I think you invited me to do something. And anyway, we somehow talked about you, and he said, oh, I know Michael really well. I remember him even when he was a young man.
That's true. I mean, he knew me since I was probably 10 or 11 or something, or 12.
That's correct. That's correct. Well, Michael, how did you get to the point where you started competing, going to competitions, piano competitions, giving recitals? Because was this during your undergrad years? How did that happen?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, on my senior year in high school, I was invited to give a recital somewhere local, a whole recital. And, you know, I thought I was really hot, you know, and I opened the program with the Beethoven Appassionata, which is a terrible mistake. You don't open any recital with that piece. And I learned my lesson. Don't ever start with the Appassionata. I made a bloody mess out of it. And I played a bunch of my favorite show pieces at the time. And of course, you know, being a young kid, you know, everybody loved it. But it was really, I learned a lot from that recital.
Was that your first time?
That was my first time playing a whole recital, and boy, did I learn my lesson.
How old were you?
I was then 17, I guess. And then I went to Michigan, and there were other students that were also good, and I had to actually really practice. And after, I was of course terribly nervous at the beginning, and that would affect how things went also. Eventually, I learned to master my nerves. Louis Nagel helped a lot with that.
Yeah, one thing that always caught my attention whenever I hear you playing is prior to recitals, you just chat with everybody and you're just very social and you don't look nervous at all. And then you walk on stage and wow everybody.
It was not always like that.
Is that so? What do you recommend? What happened for you to overcome that?
I did it a lot. Louis Nagel encouraged me to perform at every possible opportunity. And I guess I show my age when I say that there were lots of opportunities back in those days to perform, churches. And there was still a demand for what I did in those days. Yeah. And so I had a lot of chances to play, not always on good pianos and not always in formal settings, but the experience adds up after a while.
Yeah. And so did you learn so basically you learn by doing it? By
doing. I think it's really, you have to have a good teacher, and both Louis Nagel and my father were great teachers. But you really ultimately only learn by doing it.
And when did you start competing? Did you go to competitions while you were studying with Louis, or
yes,
after that?
Yeah, I did that, and the results were very mixed, as we say. I would lose a lot, and then every once in a while I'd win something. I probably lost a lot more than I won, but you won't read any of that in my resume.
Yeah, we always exclude those days.
Yeah, we
right?
exclude those things. There were many, many losses.
Michael, tell me more about, you said I had good teachers. This is something that I've noticed, and I've been teaching at MSU for 20 years. But prior to that, there were many other years that I taught in Brazil, and I taught as a teaching assistant here in the United States. But I've noticed that there has been a lot of students coming unprepared, with not much of a background in piano, especially with a rigid or a progressive learning. Tell me more about when you said I had good teachers. Tell me more about how they prepared you, or what were the things that they did.
Well, I would say that the job of a teacher, as you well know, is really to clear the way for your students, much more than to tell them how to play. You take what they have and make the most of it. And a certain amount of it is up to the student. Now,
Yeah.
a lot of what holds students back is that they can't read well enough.
Yeah.
I could get myself in trouble if I say what I really think about this. But students who are given one piece to prepare, and it takes them 6 months to learn the notes, say a Chopin ballade, they learn a Chopin ballade, it takes them 6 months just to figure out what the notes are, and then they can only play the piece at half tempo anyway. I try not to. My teachers didn't do any of that with me. They encouraged me to listen to all music, to play music that I could read and prepare in a reasonable amount of time, and to do lots of it.
Yeah. And you touched one subject that is very true. It takes too long for them to read and to learn. It's mainly by rote, and it's becoming like you are feeding them note by note until they can play at least a page or so.
Yeah, I mean, I get students, especially secondary students, who can't really read. They want to play these big pieces, but it takes them forever to learn them. I take them off the big pieces. Sometimes they resent it a little bit, but I do it anyway.
And what do you give to them?
I try to give them shorter pieces and try to give them lots of shorter pieces and move them through these pieces quickly. They don't have to learn them perfectly, but they need to learn how to read them and how to learn. If they can get past that, then they can progress much more quickly. It's very strange. I even tell, the administrators at my university that it's not about the technical proficiency of the students who audition. It's really about their ability to read and learn.
Yeah.
If they can read and learn, the repertoire is wide enough that we can always find music that suits them. And then you can give them something a slight bit too difficult for them to stretch them a little bit. But, if a student can hardly play a scale, you don't want to give them the Tchaikovsky concerto, even though they want to play it.
Yeah, and I think also what happens is there has been a lot of playing by ear.
Yes.
Yeah, and I have no problem with playing by ear, but I think they have to be correlated or walking together with the reading. And I'm going to say this, and probably I will probably also be in trouble by saying this, but I in Brazil, until the time that I was there, there was no word. There was no professor that I knew that was worried about developing the reading skills. They assumed that you would do it, so they gave you a piece and you figured out how to do it. Now in the United States, there's a lot of methods of reading skills. What do you say about that?
Well, I don't know. I never took the pedagogy class, so I never learned about any of these things. So I don't really know how to answer that, except that what I've seen, these methods of reading don't really cover reading at the advanced level. I think the only way a student is going to get proficient at reading at a more than intermediate level is to listen to lots and lots of music. Now, students are always complaining that they don't understand their music theory class. Now, music theory class for me was the easiest thing in the world because I had heard tons of music by that time. So every little concept that they taught, I would say, yes, it's just like this and just like that. And then I understood what they were doing. I could relate it to some spot in some piece of music. it's, I mean, I'm never going to learn to speak Portuguese by simply sitting and reading a basic textbook. The only way I'm going to learn it is to read it and listen to it spoken and try to speak it.
And merge yourself into it.
Yeah, you have to immerse. I mean, it's the same with music. It's exactly the same.
Yeah. I think there has been a lack of listening. There has been also a lack of trying. And I've noticed that sometimes when students stop moving their eyes, it's just like one measure and then one measure and then one. There's not a bigger view of the score.
Yeah, I have a way of dealing with that. I mean, I take a piece of paper, and when they're reading, I move the piece of paper across the score so they can't look back. They just keep moving the piece of paper across the page.
Yeah, it works, doesn't it?
It sort of works, It's one tool, one little trick, anyway.
Well, so after Michigan, you went to Juilliard and studied with Martin Ken, which is a person that I had the privilege to meet, and heard him playing an all Schumann recital, which was amazing. And at the end, he was all apologetic because his movements, he was getting older, you know how humble he was.
Oh, yes, he was.
And I was mesmerized by the way he played with so much intensity in simplicity in a way as well. And so he played an all Schumann recital. So tell me more about your experience at Juilliard and your experience studying with Martin Ken.
Wow. Where to start? Now, those are two very different things. Now, the experience of being at Juilliard, a lot of it has to do with what went on the practice floor. That was the 4th floor of the Juilliard building, where all the students, we would get together, try to play everything louder and faster than the previous person. That was a whole different matter. We would discuss how to interpret this and how to interpret that, and we'd be at each other's throats all the time. It was pretty competitive. But Marty Cannon, when studying with him, one felt one was above all of that. He was not interested in loud and fast. He was interested in getting to the heart of the music, which he did wonderfully. He was a product of another era. You have to remember he was born in 1930.
Yeah.
In those days, music meant something very different. In those days, they were 90 years closer to the composers than we are now. And music meant something different to these people, and music was heard differently in those days, and it was interpreted differently in those days. And he tried to communicate some of that to his students. And I will appreciate what he did, to the end of my days. He really taught me how to interpret music in a much more authentic way. After all, he was nearly 100 years closer to the composer than we are.
And he studied with Rosina Levine, right?
Yes, that's correct.
He was her assistant. Did he ever talk to you about his experience with her
one of these days when I'm not on, when the world is not listening, I'll tell you what he really said. But yeah, he didn't discuss her very much. And Marty Cannon was always, and I admired this very much about him, he was always an independent thinker about music. Somebody asked him once, well, do you subscribe to the Russian school of playing or the German school of playing? He just said he thinks all of that is nonsense. He does music. He doesn't do nationality.
Wonderful way. I'd never heard him saying that, although I did not get into that subject with him. In fact, I was talking to him about the Schumann. He played the sonata and he played some other things, and he was just an amazing person. And he gave a master class, which I had one student that won. In fact, he studied with you later, Bill Harned, and he was playing one of the Chopin ballad, I think, and scherzo. No, he was playing one of the scherzo, and then he was working with him, and I kept thinking, this kid has no idea who he is.
Yeah, no idea who he's working with.
No, it doesn't.
That happens fairly frequently with Martin Cannon because he didn't put on airs. He didn't pretend. He was only interested in the music. He was not interested in showing off. He wasn't interested really in whether you won the competition or not. He was really all about the music.
And it was during the time with him and after you graduated from Juilliard that you entered the Gina Bachauer international competition. And was that in Utah, right?
That was in Salt Lake City,
Utah. And can you tell us about why you got into that and if there was a preparation and how did that happen?
All right. The first thing was that during my second year of the Masters, I was lucky enough to win the Juilliard competition with the Rachmaninoff Third Concerto. And I got to play it with the Juilliard Orchestra in Lincoln Center. It was a big, big deal. And after that, Martin Cannon decided, well, maybe this guy has possibilities. And so he suggested I enter the Gina Bachauer. But it was almost an afterthought because by the time I had decided to do this, it was only about 2 weeks before the deadline for entry. And I had to make the recordings, for the tape round. We used to, it was tape recorders in those days. And then, I had all the tapes made and it was about 2 days left before the deadline. And in those days, FedEx was called Federal Express. And it was not used very much. It was still in its infancy. In those days, it would take a couple of weeks to send a package out to Utah from where I was. But anyway, it needed to get there. And I called Federal Express. And they had to come to the door to claim the package. And you had to pay a fortune to get it out there. But it arrived just in time. And they accepted me in the contest. And then it was time to start practicing.
How long did you have to practice?
Well, I probably had a month or two to get, to really start practicing the pieces. And Martin Cannon would see me almost every day. We would work on the repertoire.
And what was the repertoire, Michael?
Oh, let's see. It was a little bit of everything.
Yep.
You had a certain amount of choice. But, I played all the big guns, all the people who go to international competitions play the same pieces pretty much. You do Petrushka.
Yeah. Oh, you did Petrushka.
Yeah, you do the Liszt B minor sonata. You have the Rachmaninoff Third for the finals. And, you play a little bit of Bach. You have your Prelude and Fugue of Bach. You have your couple of movements, a movement or two from a Haydn or Mozart sonata. The usual stuff. And I had Triana by Albanese. It's a real difficult piece.
Yes.
And really most of the usual stuff.
So did you have to do chamber music as well?
In those days, you didn't have to do that. But chamber music is something that I've always loved to do. In fact, possibly more than solo music.
Well, and you are involved with a lot of chamber festivals. I can see here that you are the chamber music in Townsville, in Queensland, in Australian festival as well. So
that was something else. But I should tell you this. This is sort of funny because starting in 1987, or maybe even before that, I spent my summers at music festivals, and probably 30 or 35 summers in a row. When you're a pianist at a summer music festival, you have to play whatever they put in front of you. And so there's really almost nothing in the collaborative piano repertoire and the instrumental repertoire anyway that I haven't played. And some, the Brahms chamber music, I've played some of those pieces maybe 50 times over the years. I know a lot of them by memory. And I love to play them. They're really wonderful. And
so you did instrumental collaboration, or vocal as well.
Yeah, it was almost entirely instrumental, just because the places where I worked were mostly orchestral music camps, but didn't have a vocal component.
Mm-hmm.
When I was an undergraduate, I did a lot of vocal accompanying, but that was so many years ago, I've forgotten most of that stuff. But in instrumental music, I've played just about everything.
Well, let's go back to the competition, the Gina Bachauer competition. So tell me more about because there are several days. It's not just one day. There are maybe two.
No.
There are 3 or 4 days, right? Am I correct?
The competition went on for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You know, and the first week was mostly involved with the preliminary rounds, of which everybody played 2 preliminary rounds before the first elimination.
And what did you play? What was the repertoire?
Well, let's see. I did Petrushka. I did Prokofiev Toccata, I think. I did Prelude and Fugue of Bach, Haydn Sonata. What did I do? Triana.
So it was a recital.
It was 2 programs of 15 minutes each.
Okay.
It had to include a movement or 2 of a classical sonata and a Prelude and Fugue of Bach, and something modern and something romantic. But other than that, it could be whatever you wanted. And there were 2 rounds of that. So they had to listen to 60 people play 2 rounds of all of that. That takes a long time.
Yeah.
Now, when I went back to judge that contest, 20 years later, I saw we would listen for 13 hours a day. And I took 100 pages of notes just on the first round. But anyway, the first week or so, they were listening for 12, 13 hours a day to all these people. They took it down to maybe 10 or 12 semifinalists. And in the semifinal round, we played, I think, an hour recital each. Mm-hmm. And there, I did the Liszt B minor and a Bach partita or something. I can't remember what, but
But you could not repeat what you've done. You cannot
repeat it. They had to play other stuff. And after that, they narrowed it down to 6 finalists, and then I did the Rachmaninoff third with the orchestra.
And the orchestra was the Utah Orchestra?
Yeah, it was the Utah Symphony. It was a great orchestra.
Yeah. Was Paul Paulet still the director of the competition?
Oh, yes. And I actually, when he came to New York, after I was accepted for the competition and before it actually started, I had a lunch with him, and he gave me some very good advice for the competition, which I followed and always have. He said, start out, get them right with the first note. He said, start with Petrushka. Most people want to start with their Bach Prelude and Fugue.
Yeah, exactly.
He said, start with Petrushka, and so I did. And it worked.
To catch people's attention, probably.
Catch their attention, then do your Bach. And it worked, so who's to argue? But Paul Paulet was something, I think he was probably the one person who influenced more young pianists in the world than anyone else I know.
I agree. I remember because the university that I graduated at, Federal University of Goiás, was the host of the Gina Bachauer Latin America. So we had every year. So I was 14, 15 years old. And I was so impressed with how in the world you learn so much music and so many notes. Yeah, we also had, so it was preliminaries and then we had the recital. But in between, they had chamber music as well. So everybody had to play at least half an hour of chamber music, I think. Yeah, and then they go for the orchestra.
Yeah, the chamber music round, they didn't have that yet back in 1982, and it's really it's pretty revealing, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I support having chamber music rounds. It really you can tell very quickly whether the pianist is a musician or not, or just somebody with good technique.
I agree with you. Can you elaborate on this a little bit more, because this is something that it's my passion. I love doing chamber music, and I ask my students to do at least from their sophomore year on. Tell me more about that, Michael.
That's a very, very good policy. I totally support that. When you play chamber music, it's a completely different set of skills than playing, say, the Liszt B minor sonata. I think all students should start out playing chamber music, even before they play the solo repertoire. You learn 2 basic things that are incredibly important from playing chamber music. Number 1, you learn to listen, you learn to play in time. You have to play in rhythm, otherwise you can't play together. And number two, you learn to listen to what's going on around you. Now, and unless you can do these two things, play in time and listen to yourself, you cannot really handle the solo repertoire very well. And you'll do much better if you're a good chamber music player. This doesn't have anything to do with how fast your octaves and scales are, but this is it has to do with musicianship.
Yeah. And so would you consider instrumental music more important than vocal, or both are important?
Oh, definitely both are important. I have not done that much vocal music just because of the way my life turned out. The vocal repertoire is magnificent. Yeah. It's really just beautiful stuff, and it's huge. There's an enormous amount of beautiful vocal music, and we need to learn how to play it. Actually, you develop the ability to listen. Of course, you develop some rhythmic freedom. Singers are quite free with their rhythm, and a really musical one. Well, it's really the greatest thing if you find a really musical singer and you can work with the person. I had that experience as an undergraduate. I really missed that, I must say. But they're both equally important. It's just that the instrumental piano parts tend to be technically much more difficult to play. And that's why I was generally assigned them, because they're so hard to play. And that remains true even at my job at Louisiana State. Whenever there's a part that's really difficult, nobody else wants to deal with it, they call me in. And usually I've seen it before anyway.
And you were, this summer, you were already playing in some festivals, right? Can you tell me which ones?
This summer?
Yeah.
Well, I was in an online festival.
But
in Brazil. It was a Brazilian festival.
But didn't you fly? Didn't you go somewhere in the United States to perform?
Yeah, that was a few weeks ago. This was before the Delta variant became really bad. I actually got on an airplane and flew for the first time in a year and a half to this beautiful festival in North Carolina. And I played the same recital twice in a row, 2 days in a row. And then I flew home the next day, and the Delta variant took over just a couple of days after that, and here we are. But
yeah.
in this festival, I got to play the same recital 2 nights in a row. It was a tough program.
What was it?
I had the Clementi F-sharp minor sonata and the Chopin B-flat minor sonata in the first half. The Chopin B-flat minor sonata I've been playing since I was an undergraduate, and it just doesn't get any easier. It is a terribly difficult piece to play properly. Easy to play badly, but pretty hard to play well. Mm-hmm. And then I did 5 pieces by Medtner, who is actually a great composer. Rachmaninoff thought Medtner was the greatest living composer at the time.
Exactly.
I don't know if I want to go quite that far, but Medtner was a great composer, and his music is much harder to play than it sounds. I can't really speak for how audiences like it. It's very intellectual music, but it is beautiful stuff. I played that and then a couple of the Albani's Iberia.
Which ones?
I did Triana and Eritania.
Eritania, yeah.
Eritania is a tough piece, and so is Triana. Those are 2 really tough pieces. Beautiful, though.
Well, since we are talking about Medtner, you had selected some of, and this is Medtner Pardina, yeah? And Andrea, I don't know if you can put the Medtner for us to listen. Let's see. I don't know if she's listening to us. She probably is.
It's too much English.
No, that's right. Andrea, vamos ouvir o Medtner Paladino. I don't know if I can share that. All right. Well, let's see if I can find you. Okay, Michael. And can you tell me more about this work?
Okay. Well, I will tell you, the piece was written about 1908. While Medtner was still in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Rachmaninoff thought this piece was great.
And
The piece,
he,
yeah.
in why?
Well, he didn't elaborate why, but it really is quite a wonderful piece. It's very, first of all, it's a very quick march. I have a feeling that the Paladin is in a hurry. It's a very fast march.
Oh, right.
But of course, the Mephisto waltz is a very fast waltz also.
Exactly right. Yeah.
But anyway, this piece is very contrapuntal and intellectual in many ways. There's some very ingenious contrapuntal devices in it, but I don't think the listener will be aware of it. It's, I think, quite a cool piece, actually.
Well, I have it here. Let's see if I'm technologically able to do this. We're going to share. And let's see. I have already found you, and let's see if I can share audio. And I would like to see. Can you see it yet or no? Probably not, right?
I can't see it. But...
No? Okay. Well,
now I see it.
That was really nice.
Yeah, do you like the piece?
I really do. I know that he wrote 10 sets of fairy tales, right?
Yes.
And this is one of
This
them,
is
right?
one of them.
Yeah. So how many total are in the sets?
Oh, probably 40 something. There's lots and lots of them.
And they are all different, right?
Yeah, they're all different. And many of them are really cool pieces.
Yeah, they are beautiful, beautiful. I enjoyed listening. I mean, Metner is not my area of expertise, but I enjoy Metner because it's one of those things that you hear. What you hear is what you bring, because it's a cluster of a lot of notes.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you really have to voice well.
Yes,
Otherwise, it makes no sense.
exactly. So, do you play any other of the fairy tales?
Oh, yes. I had a sabbatical and I learned 6 of his sonatas and 10 fairy tales.
Okay.
I was planning to learn fewer pieces and perform them a lot, but the pandemic prevented me from performing. And so I took the chance to learn much more of it, and it's a good thing. Now
Have you had? I'm sorry. Have you had a chance to learn his concerti? He wrote 3, right?
Yeah, I'm not so interested in those unless you have an orchestra to play them with.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, especially after the pandemic. I don't know how many orchestra gigs there are going to be anymore.
I hear you. And he composed 14 sonatas. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was 14 or not. And you learned 3 of them?
I learned 6 of them.
6 of them. All right. It's amazing. I also would like to show our friends the Moskovsky. I'm a big fan of Moskovsky. I think he's underplayed. I think everybody should learn the etudes. And this is a set of 6 works, and this is Etincelle, right?
Yeah, this is a great encore piece. This recording comes from 20 years ago. I didn't even know it was out there.
Is that right?
But I found it, and this is a live encore from a recital I gave 20 years ago. And I listened to it. I thought it's not too terrible, so maybe.
I hate listening to myself playing, but I can relate to you. And then, all right, let's hear the Moskovsky Etincelles. Let's see if I don't know if I can put this together, Andrea.
This is only audio. This was before they didn't have much video in those days.
That is a good encore.
Great encore. Maybe I'm too old to play it now, but
I don't know about that, Michael.
I have to practice it.
Well, Mussorgsky was a contemporary of Chopin, and it is known that he and Chopin wrote beautifully for the piano and knew the art of the pianism. And do you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Mussorgsky is he wrote fabulous little pieces like this, little encore type pieces. Hardly anybody has ever written better, and audiences love this stuff, actually. There are a couple of etudes of his that I also play as encores. They just love this stuff. It's great.
Yeah. And Horowitz played those. I mean, I think the Etude cells and the I can't remember the
the A flat etude. Yeah, oh yeah.
Exactly.
And the F major etude. These are all wonderful encore pieces.
Yes.
And all the old pianists, Rachmaninoff and Hoffman and those guys all used to play Mussorgsky for encores.
And they are beautiful. Do they fit your hands better than other pieces?
Oh, yeah. They're designed to be really efficient, and you can really sound great. They're much harder. I mean, they're much easier than they sound.
Yeah, well.
It's still not easy, of course. But
that's what Michael, it's been a pleasure. We have really 7 minutes left of the hour. And the time passed by really fast talking to you. But what is your advice for a pianist, a young pianist, or a young musician nowadays in this world where live performances are being so difficult to happen? And we are living in a world of fast. Everything has to be fast. Learn fast, do fast, And what is your advice for a young musician right now?
Okay, well, this is a great question because when I started, a long, long time ago, I might have given a very different answer than I'm going to give now. The first thing, of course, you need to learn to read as well as you can read. Reading is really the key to everything. I tell my students all the time, if you can sight read really well and learn quickly, you will always make a living.
Yeah.
Every other instrument needs a pianist to collaborate with. And and sometimes the parts that the pianist has to play are just as difficult as Chopin or Liszt.
Yeah.
But they have to be learned much more quickly. So if you can read and learn really quickly, you'll probably be able to make a living at it. It won't be fun, but you'll be able to do it.
Yeah.
Now, that's the advice I would have given. I probably would have stopped there 20 or 30 years ago. Now I want to revise it a little bit. You need to become proficient with music technology. You need to learn your notation software, Sibelius, Finale, etc. And those programs are quite complex. They need quite a bit of study to learn to use them properly. Then you need to learn how to record, audio recording, and how to use digital audio workstations. Now, I didn't really know anything much about these until my sabbatical. On my sabbatical, I was planning to perform a lot, but the pandemic had other ideas. And so I decided to learn how to record and how to, at least the basics of how to use a digital audio workstation, DAW or DAW for short.
Mm-hmm.
Those are very, very complex and sophisticated programs. But I also learned that most of the music of today is not done on acoustic instruments. Now, you may have noticed when you listen to the music of today how steady the drummer is all the time. Mm-hmm. The drummer is perfectly steady. Now, no human drummer can be quite that steady. The DAWs all come with drum machines, which, of course, keep a perfectly steady beat. And hardly any recording of pop music or modern music is done on acoustic pianos anymore, because acoustic pianos go out of tune and they're not always in regulation, etc. Now they use electronic pianos, which are always in tune and always regulated.
And I noticed also the camera on top of the recording of the Metner.
Yeah, that was done by my friend Paulo Casaroc.
Yeah,
Who's an
I was going to ask.
Yeah, he's an expert at this sort of thing. And actually, he taught me everything I know.
And to put together and be synchronized, that's amazing. And he's very good at that.
He did it. He's very good at it. And he showed me a few tricks. Now, when we had to go to online teaching, this is the other thing I would advise today's musicians. They have to learn the technology and the techniques of teaching online.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is going to be a thing. You may as well get out ahead of the game. I would never have given this advice 20 years ago because I didn't have any online teaching in those days. Now, I was lucky that my former student and my friend, Paulo Casaroc, is really an expert on online teaching and setting everything up. He made the recording of the Metner for me. And that hall, it was only him and all his gadgets and all his gear, microphones, computers, cameras, cables of every type. And it was just the two of us in the recital hall.
Was that at LSU?
Yeah, I did that in the LSU recital hall and did it in one take. It took longer to set up the stuff, set up the equipment and take it down. Almost took longer to do that than to play the music. Yeah, I recorded a whole recital there, not just that piece.
Yeah, but, we are living in a different environment right now. I think we all know that we have a short time to learn how to use some technology. But I do believe that we have to learn as much as we need right now.
Yeah, so this is the advice I would give to modern pianists. A little bit less time spent practicing your octaves, a little more time practicing learning your technology and your programs and how to use a DAW, how to use Sibelius, Finale, etc. Because that's how a lot of music is made nowadays. And if you do that, you'll do fine.
Well, Michael, we are 1 minute short, and I just would like to thank you for this opportunity to interview you. I've known you for, I think, 20 years now.
At least.
No,
maybe
20.
More than that.
More than that. That's more than that. Yeah, 25 years. So thank you very much for being with us. We appreciate you being graciously being interviewed. And just hold on a second because Andrea is going to finish up the interview today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Michael Gurt. Thank you very much. Beautiful interview. Thank you, Rose. You know, Dr. Gurt, a lot of people, when they saw your publicity, they told to me, he's wonderful, he's fantastic, he's a great pianist. And yes, bravissimo. Thank you very much. And you are fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Grande prazer.
Obrigada.
Obrigada. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Muito obrigada a todos vocês. Esse é um programa da Escola de Música e Artes Cênicas da Universidade Federal de Goiás, juntamente com a Reitoria Digital e a Mississippi State University, com apoio da Fundação para a Ciência e Tecnologia de Portugal, Centro de Estudos de Sociologia e Estética Musical da Universidade Nova de Lisboa, Centro de Estudos Brasileiros, Rádio Universitária e Rádio Brasil Central FM. Fazem parte da equipe do programa Além de Mim, Maria Caroline Porto, Pablo Lisboa, Rosângela Beceba, Sérgio de Paiva e Wesley de Menezes. Muito obrigada a todos vocês pela audiência. The Piano and Its Perspectives is a program of the School of Music and Performing Arts, Digital Department of the Federal University of Goiás and the Mississippi State University, with support from the Foundation for Science and Technology of Portugal, Center for Studies in Sociology and Musical Aesthetics of the New University of Lisbon, Center for Brazilian Studies, Radio Universitária, and Radio Brasil Central FM. Besides me, Maria Caroline Porto, Pablo Lisboa, Rosângela Beceba, Sérgio de Paiva e Wesley de Menezes are part of the program's team. Thanks so much to all for the audience. Espero todos vocês para a próxima sexta-feira com o pianista Max Barros. Muito obrigada.